Hello, and welcome to episode 7 of Becoming Bob. I'm Alex, and of course today I'll be painting along with episode 7 of The Joy of Painting with Bob Ross. My canvas there is already covered with a layer of liquid white, and I'm going in now with a mix of Prussian blue and alizarin crimson, making some crisscrosses up there in the sky. Going back in, trying to get a little bit more of that crimson in there. Just blending it as much as I can there. And now I've darkened it up quite a bit by going mostly to the Prussian blue. And just taking that down to complete the sky. At the bottom, adding in a little bit of phthalo green, coming in from both sides to create some water. At this point, Bob always says, and now we've got a piece of work that's ready for any museum of modern art. Go in and wash off my brush there. Of course, the 2-inch brush I started out with. Always start out with the 2-inch brush. And now that it's cleaned off, just going in to blend everything together. Make it nice and smooth and even. Give me a nice backdrop for my painting. Switching out now for the fan brush. Pick up a little bit of permanent red mixed with titanium white there. That red color is just so strong, you can see it's just overpowering all that white. I was going for a light pink, but red really was hard to dull down. Just kind of smushing it around up there to make a few little clouds up in the sky. Another one. Now back in with the 2-inch brush to try and blend those without blending them all the way out. That was always, on this one especially, a challenge for me. With blending these delicate clouds and stuff, it's hard to keep them from just completely disappearing into the color in the background. Now I've got my knife and I'm mixing together some blue and crimson and Van Dyke brown. Just kind of marbling it up there. And right there in the middle, going in with our big mountain peak. And I just can't get the hang of this. Bob always says to really push the paint into the canvas, but whenever I push down on this, it seems like it just squishes the paint out to either side of the knife. You can kind of see that there. It's really hard to get it even. I told myself before I started this painting that I was going to try a much more dynamic looking mountain with more steep cliffs than I have been doing, but as I'm blending it out here, I really kind of got rid of most of the jaggedness that I was going for. And now to add some highlights to those mountains. And taking that mountain mix color that I made and adding some white to it. Trying to add the snow and shadow and rocks and everything that you'd see on a mountain peak. If you do it right, between the marbling of the paint and the breaking of the paint as you pull the knife across the canvas, you really can create a pretty realistic mountain effect this way. I'm going in with some darker accents there on the shadow sides of the mountain peaks. I don't get too used to this camera angle today. About halfway through filming this episode, the memory card on that camera became full and it stopped recording. I had made sure to check this camera angle to make sure it wasn't out of memory, but I forgot to do the other one. And so after a bit, you'll notice that we just go to a static shot from this side. But I'm going back in now to put a few more clouds in there. Clouds that are more in the foreground and kind of come in front of those mountain peaks that I just put in there. Now, this was the first episode that I filmed in my new studio space, and there were a few challenges. The space is going to work out a lot better, and I've made a few improvements, but you can see there my headphone that I'm listening to Bob with is hanging down in front of me. I usually have it tucked away in the shirt, but in order to start the episode and get everything set up fast enough, there was no way for me to do that on this episode. Going in now and adding more highlights. It really just adds so much more dimension to those mountains when you go in and do this. And it never looks good close up. I mean, watching the video now, it looks pretty good, but you know, when I was right up on it actually doing the painting, it just looks like a big mess. Adding some misty area at the base there. Just kind of pulling that up and blending it in. And now back in with the fan brush to put in a few more clouds. Adding another layer and bringing the painting closer and those mountains further into the back. Blending those clouds now. And now mixing up some more color. And we're going to put a few more peaks up here. Adding even more depth. These are more foothills and a lot more shallow than the peaks in the back were supposed to be. Went in to try and add some highlights quickly. At this point I was running behind Bob a little bit, and you kind of see me rushing to try and catch up. Or at the very least trying to pay attention to what's going to happen next. And even more little clouds up in front of those mountains. Taking off my brush there and blending in a little bit. Now mixing up some more color there. This time bringing some sap green into the mix. And alizarin crimson, some Prussian blue there. Mixing it all up. And now I'm going in with that 2-inch brush. We're going to add some hills in here more into the foreground. Some nice green, verdant, vegetated hills. Now at the top of that, I'm trying to pull straight up to make it look like a line of trees way off along the top of that ridge there. Not super happy with how it turned out, but it's my first time trying that one, so it'll just take practice. I'll bring in another hill from the other side, a little steeper hill, and you can see that I'm using a darker color there as we bring things more into the foreground. Bob says we should make them darker. And adding a few of those trees along the ridge line on that side. And another layer on that side. Now I was supposed to fill in a lot more there than I realized, and you'll see later in the painting I'm going to have to come back and fix that. And you know, seeing the final product, I think I did a pretty good job of covering up that happy accident there. Now I'm trying to bring in some larger vegetation there, closer up, pushing in a lot of the light greens and yellows. Off my 2-inch brush. Gotta get it good and clean. And now we're going to try and add some reflections there in my water. I think it's interesting how at the start of the painting, the entire bottom half of the canvas is painted to be water, but at the end of it, you only end up with just a little bit. And I think that ends up making a much more natural look just because of the way that reflections and water work. But it's just strange to paint the entire bottom water and then cover it all over with land and vegetation. Mixing a dark color there on the 1-inch brush. Nice dark green color. Some more texture and more vegetation there. Adding in some highlights with some bright yellow. differentiate, of course, between the vegetation in real life and the vegetation reflected in the water. Just a little bit of white there on the edge to go in and kind of cut in a water line. I was pretty happy with that water line. Sometimes the water lines just don't want to cut in while the paint doesn't want to come off the knife. It doesn't flow smooth. That one I was really happy with. You see me working really fast now, just trying to fill in as much kind of vegetation background color as I can. And this is when I realized what I had done, and I'm having to go back in and fill in that space. Nice big dark blotch over on that side that's going to become a big tree, and all the vegetation around it. Of course, because it's closer in the foreground, I'm using a darker color and working very fast. Just pulling in some reflections there. And pull them across to give them a watery effect. And now back in with the knife using some Van Dyke Brown. Put in some various trunks and branches. Start building some trees there. Bringing a little bit of the crimson there. Kind of spice up that vegetation accent color there. You can see it just kind of glopping on there. Went and got some of my liquid white, and that should help with that some. Of course, that thins it out, and a thin paint sticks to a thick paint. The problem I have, though, is that liquid white doesn't always completely mix. I feel like no matter how hard I try, I still get white bits dabbing onto the painting. And that just doesn't look natural. Coming in on this side. I would really like to show this to you from another angle, but as I mentioned, that camera is no longer filming at this point. You can see my canvas is really moving around there. I don't know if it's the way I've got it clamped in. I am using a couple of Cobalt brand ratcheting clamps to hold it onto the easel there. I don't feel like the other ones have bounced around quite that much. You can see all the paint splattered there on my hand from trying to do all this vegetation so fast. Had a little land on that side. And some on that side. Really defining where the water is and where the land is. Now these water lines I was not as happy with. Especially because of how smoothly that first one went. When you're following along with Bob, you don't have time to stop and worry about it. You just have to keep going, and that's part of the magic. This time I'm taking some really dark paint and putting in the shadow part of a big tree right over our mountains, right up in our sky. This is what Bob likes to do. He likes to have you paint this painting and then paint something big over it right in the front. Putting in a trunk now with the knife. And another little tree coming out there off the side of the big one. Nice big strong branch there. Thicken that trunk up a little. And it's the way you put these trees together that really makes them look a lot more 3D. You start, of course, with the shadow in the background, then you add the trunk, and then you build the highlight leaves up in the front. It's just a really logical way to go about it. Yeah, you can see that it's picked up that liquid white in there some. Ah yes, now is when I realized that I have to go and fill that back in. And fortunately that brush wasn't clean from where I'd used it before, so I was able to pick up some of that color and not mess too much with the hill in front of it, and you know, just make it look just kind of like some mist there. Now, here on this side, put in a nice big old dead tree. Plenty of brown there, of course. Just trying to curve it around to give it a bark-like appearance. A couple little plants to kind of pull it into that thicket there. Now I'm trying to get the top off of my linseed oil to thin down some permanent red, but as you could see, I couldn't get my linseed oil to open. So I'm just going in with straight permanent red, which it really made that color way too bright there. Instead of being a highlight, it just looks like a crazy red streak on the tree. But sometimes you just kind of have to go for it, and you don't have time to find an alternative. And just putting in some more foliage there in the foreground. Trying to differentiate between plants and really make them stand out as individuals. Now just going in and cutting in all the little sticks and twigs, which all add so much depth and detail to the painting in very little time. But it is possible to overdo it, and something you gotta be careful with. I still haven't quite got the hang of it, but I'm definitely getting more deliberate with how I use it. You can see there I'm trying to find good places, more natural looking places to put those sticks. Try and keep from doing them all at the same angle, all the same length, because that's not what you find in nature. Trying again with the linseed oil. And of course it's not working for me. So I gave up, and now I've had a second to think about it from the first time, I just used a little bit of the paint thinner there and the permanent red to go in and sign this one as finished. Thanks for joining me today for episode 7. This one took a little longer than I'd hoped to make, but that's just part of the journey. I'm Alex, and thanks for watching. Have a great day.